The El Conservador Radio Show is sponsored by the Federation for American Immigration Reform and George Rodriguez on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. Time for the El Conservador Radio Show with George Rodriguez. George is a constitutional conservative who loves to expose fake news and liberals. And now, El Conservador, George Rodriguez.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Once again, my friends, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you on this Saturday, December the 21st, 4 days before Christmas. Merry Christmas. I hope everyone has a merry and safe Christmas this coming week. Let me tell you, we have a packed show, so let me tell you real quick who our guests are. Our first guest is Chris Clem. He's a new guest. He is a retired Border Patrol officer. He is going to be chatting about the history of the Border Patrol, what he saw on his watch, and what he expects now that he's retired and we have a new administration. Then we have Mr. Roman Gabriel, son of the famous Roman Gabriel, Los Angeles Rams quarterback. Roman has a nonprofit organization that addresses youth and drug abuse. You're going to want to hear what he's got to say. Then we've got Miss Sarah Carter, a new friend of mine, who's going to be talking about all the children that have disappeared, my friends. You're going to want to hear what she's got to say. And our final guest is Mr. Matt O'Brien. Matt is going to be talking about the issue of a terrorist attack in Chicago, my friends. You're going to want to hear this. Not only do we have criminals running around, we've got terrorists running around. So, without further ado, let's go to our first guest, Chris Clem. Merry Christmas, everyone. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Once again, my friends, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio. And we have a new guest with us, my friends, someone that I've had the pleasure of meeting, Mr. Chris Clem, who is a retired Border Patrol chief, 27 years in the Border Patrol. And he's been a chief Border Patrol agent in various places, knows his way around the agency, not to mention around the border. And he's also a resident of Arizona, beautiful Arizona. I really, really wanted to get him on and chat with him about the history of the Border Patrol, because sometimes we don't know exactly what the history is, how it came about, as well as what has happened to it. So, Chris, thank you very, very much for taking time to be with us today, buddy.
George, great to be on the show, and likewise, happy to be on here and just talk about what I've experienced, what I've seen, and it's such an important issue today and tomorrow and for the future of this country.
Now, first of all, tell us, why was the Border Patrol organized in the first place, way back when? 1920s, I believe.
Yeah, 1924 is when we were founded, and we were really kind of before that, a ragtag group of marshals and Texas Rangers, but it was, under the Immigration Nationality Act, we became the Border Patrol in 1924, and it really was, about prohibition. It was about immigration. It was just about keeping our border safe. There was, it was wide open, right? I mean, the country just really was standing up. We were post-World War I at that time. I mean, you really have to just kind of look at where we were as a nation. But we realized that we had a lot of people coming in from all over the world, and they were, we needed to get organized. We really needed, and I think it resonates to this day, 100 years later. We need to know who and why somebody is coming in to our country. We need to regulate that, and that's the critical piece of the Border Patrol, is to make sure that people come in the right way, through the front door, on a guest list, applying to come in here through a lawful port of entry, whether it's the air, land, or sea, not in between the ports, breaking our laws. And so, that resonates as much of a priority today as it did 100 years ago.
The whole situation with border security, I remember my grandparents complaining about bootlegging, and I remember them complaining about illegal aliens taking Mexican Americans' jobs in Texas. Now, here we are in 2024, 100 years later. What has happened the past 4 years in your thoughts?
Well, I will tell you, it's a culmination of things that have happened over the last, I would say the last 20 years or more, is the true conflating of immigration and border security. Because while they are related, they are mutually, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have one and the other. We are asking, all too often, or should I say, all too often it's getting combined. When you hear, mainstream media or progressive political ideologies, putting immigration and illegal immigration and border security all in the same pot. And that it couldn't be further from the truth, because a well-regulated immigration system starts with a secure border. So stop conflating immigration and border security. Let's get the border security piece fixed, because that's a national security and public safety threat. Immigration is truly an economic and humanitarian way to continue to prosper and grow this country and help this country and others benefit from lawful immigration. What I've seen over the last several administrations was this conflating of the two and giving false choices and virtue signaling. Like, you can't be pro-security, that means you're anti-immigrant. Or if you're pro-immigration, that means you're an open border person. And none of that could be further from the truth. We just want to make sure that we can control who and what comes in, and that anything and anyone that comes in illegally is taken care of through a consequence and removed if necessary. And I think it just gets broad brushed, and that's why people don't understand the complexities of immigration. That's why politicians like to put in these really fancy terms like comprehensive immigration reform, and it becomes a bunch of trade-offs between miles of wall and the number of worker or visas. Why should those even be in the same conversation? And so what I'm hoping that's going to happen under this new incoming Trump administration is they're going to focus on the border security piece. Let's finish what we started under the first Trump administration, secure the border. Then we actually have a solid starting foundation on cleaning up the lawful pathways and the immigration system that has just been, abused and exploited by people from all around the world, to include our own politicians. So, that's kind of where I see this going. We've got to make sure we start with, fixing the leak at the border by securing it, and then we can clean up the immigration mess that it's created.
Yes, when I worked on the 1986 law way back when, the IRCA, Immigration Reform Act, I remember the anxiety to enforcement and from politicians, and the demand for amnesty. And it was supposed to be the one and only amnesty. And since then, there's been all sorts of amnesties, and many of them not even called amnesties, the catch and release amnesty, I call it. It just seems like, the enforcement piece is completely ignored constantly.
Well, and that's part of the problem, too. I think that, like many, I want to believe this. I think it's I think I'm not naive, but I want to be an optimist, that this comes from a good place, like 86 Act. It came from a good place. Like, we were going to clean the slate. We're going to have a fresh start. We're going to right the wrongs, and it won't happen again. Well, unfortunately, they, instead of solidifying and really holding the 86 IRCA accountable and the employers and everybody in the system accountable, they didn't. They just added more to it, and it's made it worse, and it's made everybody. I don't know what's more complicated, our tax code or our immigration code. How does somebody come in? And that's the problem, right? So it's made it ripe for exploitation. The other thing that you touched on, I think is important, is this constant fear mongering of people are going to get deported or they're going to get rounded up. Well, there are ways that's going to happen if it's focused on those that are national security and public safety threats. But if you've been here under some program and it's expired, or you're here illegally and you have an opportunity to right the wrong, we should find that common sense and compassion to make it happen. But you don't get a free pass. You're going to have to pay a consequence of some sort. Whether that means going back to your country or paying a fine or doing something. because we've got so many people that are waiting in line to do things the right way. And just like when there's a bad cop, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And I see the same thing when it comes to immigration. When I talk to people that have come the right way, whether they're naturalized or they're resident aliens or they're here on visas, they're like, we did it the right way. They despise people that are cutting in line. And it's time to get that fixed, right? I really am optimistic that this new administration is going to focus on the security piece, and then they're really going to say, hey, what is it that this country needs? Go to the business owners, go to academia, go to the workforce, go to the farmer and say, what is it that you need, and how can we make that happen? And, give that, we're going to still hold people accountable if you exploit people or the system. But let's try to make a simpler way so we don't have this, continued push for illegal immigration. Because you can go back to the 50s, starting with the Bracero program. And when you saw a lawful means where people can come get meaningful work and can go back and do it again the next season, we actually had a drop in illegal immigration because people found a way. There was a lawful path. If we could get that right in the 50s, why can't we get this right in 2024?
You got it. Perfect question. I love it. We're going to need to let you go, my friend, but any closing thoughts?
Well, I will say this. I am grateful for people like you that, number one, literally have a decades of experience, have actually worked with administrations and worked on the ground to look for solutions and not just talk about the problem, but also giving people like myself and others a platform to bring the truth to the public, because it resonated. We saw that in this year's elections, right? We saw the House, the Senate, and the presidency, focus on these type of issues. And the American people are tired of these problems continuing to be, pushed down the road. So I'm grateful for people like yourself that give myself and others a voice so we can bring the facts and bring some ideas and solutions to the public. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity, George.
I really, really thank you. Folks, we've been talking with our new friend, Mr. Chris Clem, retired Border Patrol chief. And Chris, we got to get you back on the show again as things evolve and develop in the coming administration, and we'll see what's going on with the border crisis at that point. Thank you very much for joining us.
You got it. Thank you.
Once again, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Once again, my friends, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio. And we've got our good friend, Mr. Roman Gabriel, with the Sold Out for Youth Foundation. Roman, as you might recognize by his name, is the son of the great NFL football player for the Rams, and he himself was a player in the NFL. But now he is full in to saving youth, America's youth, and I wanted to get him on to get an update of what is happening. Roman, thank you very much for taking time. Welcome to the show again.
George, great to be back with you.
First of all, give us an update. What is going on with the drug, the fentanyl problems in the U.S. right now with the youth? Give us an update.
Well, first of all, congratulations to President Trump, because I think that's going to first and foremost be a huge change, is getting the border under control, getting it closed, stopping the fentanyl flow coming in, and to deal with these cartels that are engaging our young people, not only online but directly selling these fake fentanyl pills and these illicit fentanyl-laced products. As you know, George, many of the fentanyl poisonings are accidental and could be prevented, and much of that is because the people of our country have not been educated, and part of the blame has got to fall on this last administration, the federal government, for not putting out a massive fentanyl education campaign so that people could understand how dangerous this poison is and how they can protect themselves and their families. So our organization, the Sold Out Youth Foundation, has a fentanyl education campaign. It is our goal that within the next 2 years that every American home would have fentanyl education online at their fingertips through their devices. But in the meantime, we're serving public and private schools through a comprehensive fentanyl education online program and curriculum that benefits school staff and administration, school students, as well as parents through the school's already existing communication systems. So we're leveraging what the schools already have in place to be able to get the information out to the people who need it most, as well as law enforcement and others who come in contact with parents and students, like SRO officers and caseworkers, school nurses, counselors. So we're providing valuable and critical tools and resources to save lives. I think one of the biggest statistics that has recently come out through our friend Jim Rao at Families Against Fentanyl has been the fact that it isn't just the number one killer of 18 to 48-year-olds. When you look at 5 to 14-year-olds in our country right now, it's the number 2 killer behind suicide. It's up 1,400% since 2021, according to Families Against Fentanyl, the updated statistics. So what that says is that our young people are being approached with these fake fentanyl pills and these illicit, fentanyl-laced recreational products, including vape, which has already been a prevalent thing that students have taken advantage of by getting around the safety protocols of social networking through TikTok, Snapchat, and they're being approached on those networks to buy these products that they don't know are fake. We had to adjust our educational program, not just for middle school and high school, but for K through 12, because parents give their kids cell phones at a very early age, sometimes as 4th, 5th grade, and they don't understand that even though their kids can call them if they get in an emergency, they don't know that those phones are being used to directly connect to their students through gaming, through social networking, and through kids easily getting around the safety protocols to purchase, these fake fentanyl pills and other recreational drugs. So, I think that closing the border obviously is going to be a tremendous asset for so many reasons, but we need to also realize that there's enough fentanyl, stockpiled in the country to be able to kill people 2-3 times over. So this is going to be a problem going forward. So education is a huge thing that needs to be done, and that's what we're talking to the administration about and working with you and others, the Border 911 and Families Against Fentanyl and Facing Fentanyl and other organizations that are interested in educating Americans to the danger of this and how we can make sure that they have the right information to be able to make proper and safe decisions for their kids.
The situation with the information and education, I mean, it's very, very obvious to everybody that the mainstream news has not really done a good effort of talking about it. I mean, I rarely have seen ABC, NBC, CBS cover much about this on 60 Minutes or any of their big shows. What is your intention? How do you plan to approach this in the coming years, in the coming months?
Well, you bring up a great point, George. It's one thing to educate Americans about this and to use, schools to educate, because they have a system set up where people can be reached quickly and fast through online engagement. But the news is all about ratings. They're all about, making things, controversial and politicizing it. And they've done a really good job of pointing out how terrible the border is and the impact of the border on things like child trafficking and crime and, fentanyl and illicit drugs coming across the border and all those things and how they impact people and the economy and safety, national security. But what they haven't done a good job is they have a responsibility to their listeners and viewers to educate them. And, it isn't rocket science. I mean, if you go to soldouttv.com on our public site and you click on fentanyl education, there's information there that can save people's lives and can educate not only adults but their children as well. And we have to do a better job of educating the media that there are organizations and there are tools and resources out there that they could be helping to save lives on a massive scale because of the numbers of people that watch and listen to them.
Excellent. Now, one last question before we let you go. Because of your pedigree, and I'll use that word, your pedigree with NFL, your dad's involvement and your own involvement, Super Bowl week is usually a big event for discussing all sorts of issues. Black Lives Matter certainly took advantage of it not too long ago. And I'm wondering, are you going to be able to, are you hoping to get some notoriety during that period?
Well, we've been doing that for 30 years. I've been a member of the NFL media and have covered the Super Bowl since 1994, and I give thanks to my father who passed away April 20th because he had an 17-year career in the NFL with the Rams and the Eagles, and he's greatly respected. And that opened up the door for me to play professional football and have the opportunity to get involved in what is a small group of people, a network of people that's really tight. And as you know, the NFL is the number one sport and entertainment in the world. They get the best ratings on television. They have the ability to put out through their platform lots of powerful and important messaging in our communities, as well as subjects that people need to know about. So for the last 10 years, we have been promoting our foundation, promoting drug and alcohol abstinence through the Super Bowl, and we'll be in New Orleans again this year, working with you guys as well at Border 911. We plan to have some special events as well as be on Radio Row, where we have the opportunity to put the messaging out to the world through all sorts of multimedia that covers the Super Bowl. But we've got a very special event coming up just before the Super Bowl on January 16th at UC Irvine. It'll be the Roman Gabriel Legends Charity Celebration. My dad passed away on April 20th, and we'll be honoring his career and life and the impact that he had in raising over $10 million for charities across the country through his career and using his platform as the Rams quarterback. So we'll be honoring my father, and we'll have 20-plus Rams celebrities at the event, as well as, of course, the benefit of the event and the proceeds will go towards our public education program, helping kids in Southern California public schools and across the country. And we'll have a fentanyl awareness campaign with leaders from corporate, education, law enforcement, celebrities coming to learn more about the fentanyl poisoning. And, of course, in Orange County, where we're having the event, it's one of the higher areas for drug overdose and fentanyl problems. So we're looking forward to that. And if you want to purchase tickets to that event, or you want to get on our raffle auction that'll be going on until January 16th, just go to RomanGabrielEvents.com. That's RomanGabrielEvents.com if you want to join us there or watch it on streaming that night on the 16th. And so we're starting the 16th through Super Bowl. We're going to be putting out the messaging about fentanyl, making people aware. And our hashtag for the Super Bowl is going to be tackling fentanyl, saving lives, hashtag saving lives. So we're appreciative of the NFL giving us a platform to be able to put this out to the world. And we're looking forward to many NFL current and former players and coaches that are going to support us, speak into this. And, of course, my show, The Roman Gabriel Show, you can go to RomanGabrielShow.com. We're on podcasts anywhere you get it, or on radio, as well as streaming on YouTube. We'll be there all week, and members, of course, of Border 911 will be coming down to put the messaging out as well, and we're looking forward to working with local law enforcement. You know, the whole goal, George, for everybody is, we have the ability to put this messaging out. We need to protect Americans, and there are many Americans, and as you know, over 90% of the accidental poisonings are preventable. And the only reason that they're not is because people have not been educated. And this is simple. This is very easy. Just go to soldouttv.com, click on fentanyl education, take the link, send it to all your friends, family members, sit down with your children and make sure they understand what this poison's all about. And let's take care of this problem. This is the number one killer in our country, and it doesn't have to be. And I'm so glad that the new administration coming in is going to put a spotlight on this, that it isn't just about closing the border, but it's also about educating people to this. So I look forward to continuing to work with you, George, and working with so many worthy organizations where all we care about is protecting our next generation of kids, our next generation of leaders. So please go to soldouttv.com and check out the website and make sure you educate your friends and family, because it could save somebody that you love.
You got it, buddy. Once again, my friends, we've been speaking with Mr. Roman Gabriel of the Sold Out for Youth Foundation. Roman, you keep up the good work, and we'll get you back on sometime soon again, buddy.
Thanks, George. Appreciate the time.
You got it. Once again, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio.
The Federation for American Immigration Reform, known as FAIR, fights to restore common-sense border controls and immigration policies that work for America and its future. America's immigration system and border controls have been decimated by Washington politicians and special interests, undermining the interests and security of the American people. FAIR mobilizes grassroots activists to make sure the voices of the American people are heard in Washington. Find out more about FAIR and what we do by going to fairus.org.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Once again, my friends, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio. And we've got Miss Sarah Carter, dear friend who works with me on the Border 9/11 organization. Sarah is a Fox News contributor. She has her own podcast, and she is very, very active, my friends, in doing a lot of reporting about what's going on. In fact, the reason I wanted to get her on was, first of all, she's just gotten back from El Salvador, and I hear El Salvador is beautiful this time of year. No, just kidding, just kidding. Sarah, thank you for taking time, and welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, George. Thank you so much for having me on. And El Salvador is beautiful, and Guatemala, and Central America this time of year. And I think right now in El Salvador, what's so stunning is that for the first time I think in decades, right? Since maybe the 1980s, since the war, before the war, you can walk through San Salvador now and you feel safe, and you don't feel like, like you're going to be taken down by MS-13, which is pretty incredible. What has happened in El Salvador, it's really transformed.
Yeah, tell us about that. Tell us about your visit and why it is so safe. What is going on down there?
Oh, well, it's because of President Nayib Bukele and his policies. Let me tell you, I was there prior to Bukele's operation, and he conducted this massive operation where, it was within a week they were able to pick up tens of thousands of MS-13 gang members off the streets and incarcerate them. They did this under terrorism laws because their nation, and this is according to not my statement, but an interview I conducted recently with the Minister of Justice, Gustavo Villatoro, where he talked about how, El Salvador was living in a parallel state. They had the cartels, the terrorist organizations, MS-13, basically running the country alongside a government that wasn't able to function. Wow. Because you had these, massive gang members. MS-13 used to be this disparate organization, right? You had MS-13 gang members in LA. You had MS-13 in Fairfax. You had MS-13 in El Salvador, all over the place. But once they started to become more and more cohesive, once they started to conduct a lot more operations for the major cartels out of Mexico, then you saw a much more organized MS-13, a much more organized Barrio 18. And even though they're worse than hooligans, they look like their actions could be described as demonic. And I would say that because, talking to President Bukele, and I had the pleasure of talking to him numerous times, and I was at his inauguration, he discussed some of the horrors that he had become privy to when he decided to make, change El Salvador completely. When he said, no more, this is going to happen no more. We're going to designate these guys terrorists. We're going to pick them up. We're going to take them off of our streets, and we're going to make the country safe again. I visited El Salvador, George, prior to, obviously these recent trips. And one of the reasons why I ended up in El Salvador in the first place was I was covering child trafficking. And there was a smuggler from El Salvador that wanted to speak with me. He was working for one of the big organizations. And I had not even met President Bukele yet. I hadn't met anybody there yet. I was going in with some sources who had arranged this for me. There were people that were dealing with this particular human smuggler on an intel level, and I really wanted to make this interview happen. I really was concerned about children, number one and foremost. And I went in there and I met with this smuggler, and I said, "Look, why did you want to talk to me? We're risking a lot meeting here right now because obviously the people you work for will not take kindly to this." And he said, "Look, the reason I'm talking to you is because we have children that we've been smuggling, and they've been ending up in the hands of these cartels, and these children don't have guardians. Some of these kids might make it to the United States, but I can tell you this, other kids will never make it. Some of these kids are used for organ harvesting. Some of these children, and that goes beyond the abuse and rape and physical and mental abuse that these children have been through." He goes, "I cannot be a part of that." Wow. And I want people to understand that this is happening. I mean, it blew my mind. I knew and understood and had heard that organ harvesting had happened in the past. And I knew that it was possibly happening, but I thought it was very minimal. And I just thought even that was horrific. But the fact that we were actually opening our borders and allowing these cartels to raise hundreds of billions of dollars off the deaths of children was astonishing to me, that our government was allowing this. That they were aiding and abetting the cartels in this, and they still are.
That's amazing.
And that was to me the beginning of El Salvador, and then it eventually, like, I've been there and I plan on going back multiple more times. I've been releasing some of the exclusives on Fox for the first time on the big weekend show, and then this week I'm posting on my X, of course, the Sarah Carter show, and my X show, Rumors, Scandals, and Truth, some of the video clips that I have from El Salvador with my interviews. I went to Secot prison, and so that was eye-opening as well. That's the maximum security prison in El Salvador.
Now tell us about the kids, because we have heard about the number of children that are missing, that cross the border. They are placed, well, heaven knows where they're placed, but they've lost completely any contact with them. They don't know where they are.
Yeah, this is horrific. Now that you know that part of the story, right, that some of these children have literally been dismembered or killed, maybe never made it to the border. I want you to think about the over 500,000 children that have crossed our border, unaccompanied minors from all over, mostly Central America, Mexico, South America, but from all over the world. We have over 500,000 children. Of those 500,000 children that have crossed our border, over 325,000 of those children have been lost. Our system can no longer track them. They do not know who they are with. They do not know if the people that they have dropped them off with are actually real relatives or not. They have found evidence, and I'm talking, and I'm going to be very straight here. I hate using the word they, so I'm going to correct that. It is not only the Homeland Security committees, but we have had whistleblowers like Tara Rodas and others who have come forward, who worked with HHS, who worked with the Office of Refugee Resettlement under HHS, and have said, look, these children are lost. They are gone. We do not know where they're at. And this government, our government, has a very little interest in finding them and protecting them. Some of the children, when they tried to track them, they took the addresses. One address in particular was a strip club where, can you imagine? That was the address that was given by the people who picked up the children. And we allowed them to take those children. Some of the addresses are buildings that have been abandoned for 5 or 10 years. Some of them are abandoned homes. Some of the children have been found living in apartments, 20 children per apartment.
Wow.
Some of these kids have been put into prostitution. Those are the ones that we can kind of track. I mean, and we don't know what happened to them. Some of them have been found, but very few. And so it is imperative, and I know it is going to be a top priority of the Trump administration under President-elect Trump and Tom Homan, who was with us at Border 911 and is now going to be charged with the very difficult and very important task, as our borders are, to locate these children and bring justice, hold people accountable if these children have been abused, if these children have been harmed in any way. The people that have taken these children should be held accountable, and these children should be reunited with guardians that will take care of them. I have spoken to people in El Salvador, George, highest levels of government, and I have let them know that there are children here that want to be repatriated back home, but have not been given that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that our government, along with hopefully with President Nayib Bukele's government, I believe that'll happen. They will work with us to ensure that these children are brought to safety and that justice is served. We cannot be a nation founded on principles that allows children to be abused. And, you know, this is not just coming from me. So for any of the naysayers out there that are listening to this that think, oh, well, it can't be that bad, read the New York Times piece. It was a phenomenal piece. Wish I could remember the name of the journalist now. But she tracked down a lot of these children, found out that in every single state in our nation, she found children that were underage and forced into working at, and I will not mention any names here of companies because, you know, I leave that up to everyone else. But companies that, you know, that are selling chicken, companies that are cereal companies, these are companies that we purchase, you know, products that we use for everyday life, found that children were actually being used in the workforce, underage children, not going to school, you know, illegal in the country illegally, being used in major corporations, you know, for cheap labor. That is unacceptable. This is not who we are. This is not who we are.
You know, well, when you're talking and describing this, the only thing I can think of was when Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez was down here in South Texas and went to a supposed caged children's site and
right.
And cried. You know, where is she now with this kind of a situation?
Absolutely. Look, I'm the same person I was when I was covering the Bush administration, all the way through Biden. I mean, through, you know, Obama, through President Trump, and now then Biden, and then now President Trump again. I'm the same exact person. I held the Bush administration as accountable for border failures and issues at the border especially when I was a young journalist working at newspapers, that I do right now. And I cannot believe how much worse this is. Where is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? That's why you know it was crocodile tears.
Yep.
It was all lies.
Yep.
These people do not care about these children. They cannot, because you cannot hear about this and not stand up and say, this is unacceptable. I'm not putting up with this anymore. I don't care who you are. But they don't do that.
They don't. Sarah, we're going to let you go, but tell the people where they can follow you. We want to make sure that our listeners know where they can follow you and read your stuff and see your videos, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, gosh. Definitely subscribe to the Sarah Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. You can follow me on Truth at Sarah Carter Official, X at Sarah Carter DC, on Instagram at S Carter DC. And please, you know, go out there, support anybody who wants to help resolve this crisis, whether that's Border 911 or anybody else. Remember, we're out there because we care about these children. We care about the people. We want to protect our nation, but we want to protect the babies too. Let's do it together. We can only do it if we're working together.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Once again, my friends, we've been speaking with Miss Sarah Carter with the Sarah Carter Show, as well as a contributor to Fox News. You keep up the good work, and we'll get you back on sometime soon because we need updates on what is happening.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you need me, George, and I feel so bad, just call me straight up. Just call my phone. Be like, hey, girl, I need you on the show. And I'll answer my phone, okay?
You got it. Once again, my friends, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Once again, my friends, George Rodriguez, El Conservador, talking to you from San Antonio. And we've got my good friend, Mr. Matt O'Brien, with the Immigration Reform Law Institute in Washington, D.C. I wanted to get Matt on because there is a very interesting story that has kind of been overlooked by most of the mainstream media. And this is regarding an incident that occurred back in October. I believe it was October the 26th, where there was a Jewish man on his way to the synagogue in Chicago, and he was gunned down by a terrorist, by a Muslim terrorist. And very little has been said about it, but charges have been found and an investigation is ongoing. The question is, my friends, we know about the illegal alien criminals, the MS-13 and the Venezuelan gangs right here in San Antonio even. But what about the terrorists? So let's talk about them. Matt, thank you for taking time to be with us. Welcome to the show. Tell us what you know. Tell us what you have found out.
Well, so this case was particularly interesting. This was an individual who is from Mauritania, which is over in that corner of North Africa near Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, that part of the world. Which in a lot of ways can be considered the birthplace of modern Islamic jihadism. As people may remember from the history books, Algeria was a French colony and got involved in a bloody civil war trying to free itself from French control. And there was about a 50-50 mix of the forces that were fighting against France that were either Islamically motivated or were Marxist. And so this gentleman wandered across the border near San Ysidro, California, and the Border Patrol, under the Biden open borders policies, encountered him and just simply said, okay, you said the magic A word, asylum. We are going to turn you loose in the interior of the United States. And it's not clear what kind of vetting activities were done. Now, he later committed suicide in his cell, which is, I think, why this fell off of the radar of the media, because as the old saying goes, dead men don't tell tales. But the real issue here is how many people with these kinds of tendencies, with affiliations for the philosophies of terrorist group, with anti-Semitic hate in their hearts, have been allowed into the United States, as we've had literally millions of people screaming over the border unchecked.
That's right. I mean, even here in San Antonio, we had a gentleman that was caught who was on the terrorist watch list. But again, because he was on the watch list, and apparently because under Mayorkas's and Biden's guidelines, he had not committed a crime, so to speak, or he had not been caught committing a crime. He was caught driving without a license. They let him go, and there was no problem. How many are out there just waiting for the right opportunity?
There's got to be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. I mean, it has now become a question, because of the Biden administration's policies, not of if we're going to experience another large-scale terrorist attack, it's when. And I mean, that may sound like an exaggeration to some people in your audience, but if you stop and take a look at how things played out, after the United States tightened its immigration controls and tightened its security procedures all over the country, in the wake of the September 11th attacks, we had more terrorist attacks. We had the crazy man in the pickup truck who tried to run the bicyclists over in New York City. We had the Boston Marathon bombing. We had the Pulse nightclub shooting. We had the San Bernardino shooters. I mean, those are just the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So those are people who got in when the border was tight, and when the restrictions were still in force. People don't understand that the Biden administration simply erased the border. They took away even the line in the sand, and whoever showed up here, if they didn't show up wearing a T-shirt that said, "I'm an MS-13 murderer and rapist," they were allowed into the country. So inevitably what that means is that terrorists, foreign intelligence operatives, and foreign military operatives took advantage of that. So we now have a lot of frightening people in this country that never would have gotten into the country had we had the kind of border controls that Donald Trump put into place functioning while Biden was in office.
What we have is very serious. People need to understand it is very serious. We have gangs operating left and right. The MS-13 people, the Venezuelan gangs, and they have committed murders. We've got many illegal aliens who are not even related to those gangs, who are not involved with those gangs, and they're committing atrocities, let alone people who hate us, who are in here. I really am very concerned about this, my friend.
And there's reason to be concerned. I mean, when we stop and look at this Tren de Aragua gang, they're not just a standard run-of-the-mill gang. Organized crime in communist totalitarian states only operates with a certain level of acquiescence from the totalitarian state. And there was a former colonel in the Venezuelan army pre-communism who is at a think tank in D.C., and I cannot off the top of my head recall which one, but he did a great presentation the other day, and he said these Tren de Aragua folks have all been trained by the communist government, the Marxist government in Venezuela, in assassination tactics, in intelligence and counterintelligence techniques. So these are not people who are simply coming into the government, into the United States to get past the government controls and engage in criminal activity. What they're doing is they're coming here as agents of the Venezuelan communist government. There's Iranian forces operating in Venezuela. There's Russian forces operating in Venezuela. And these people are coming in to commit intelligence activities against the United States under the guise of being involved in semi-organized street crime. And, the gangs that are already here, like MS-13 and the Latin Kings and other similar gangs, are becoming more sophisticated, and they're developing alliances with the drug cartels across Latin America, who are in turn developing alliances with terrorist groups. So there's a very scary convergence between large-scale organized criminal actors and groups that want to overthrow the government of the United States.
So here in San Antonio, for example, as well as a few other communities I can think of, like Los Angeles, like Chicago, there has been an absolute movement to try to disarm the police so that they can relate more to these immigrant groups. What are your thoughts when you hear that?
Well, I think that's an absolute absurdity. I mean, disarm the police so they can relate more to the groups. I think many of these groups are armed to the teeth. During my time with ICE and working national security at USCIS, I was astounded at the number of people that were armed like Pancho Villa's bandits back in the day. People don't realize this, but the drug cartels are actively involved in smuggling weapons into the United States. And so there's a lot of heavy-duty military-grade weaponry that is on the streets with all of these criminals. And the fact is that not only the police, but private citizens should be able to defend themselves from these things. And this, disarming and defunding the police and, putting social workers out in place of the police is just absurdist thinking. I come from a long family of police officers, firefighters, and other first responders. And one of the police officers in my family, commenting on replacing police with social workers, said that'll be great until the first time that a social worker gets thrown down a flight of stairs trying to resolve a crime. I mean, there's a reason why we aren't police officers, and there's a reason why we have a corps of uniformed professionals in our police forces who have been trained how to deal with criminal violence.
Couldn't say. My friend, any closing thoughts before we let you go?
Well, I think that things are going to change under the new administration. I've been seeing all kinds of positive things from the Trump administration. I think Donald Trump proved the last time around that he was not one to play around when the national security of the United States is involved. But I think that the situation has become so bad that it's really going to require a significant amount of effort just to hit the reset button. I mean, the estimates for how many people came here lawfully and unlawfully under the Biden administration range anywhere from 7 million to 12 million to more than that. And just to put that in terms of population of U.S. cities that people can understand, 12 million people is the totality of New York City and a number of the surrounding suburbs. So there are enough people that have strolled across the border without being looked at or vetted to fill up New York City and most of the bridge and tunnel suburbs. That's a frightening amount of people. We hear those numbers said on the news and we talk about them, but until you have something to put that number in perspective and give it some scale, people really don't realize how many people that is.
Yeah. It is frightening. It is frightening. My friend, thank you very much for spending some time with us. We've been speaking with Matt O'Brien, Director of Investigations at the Immigration Reform Law Institute in Washington, D.C. Matt, thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you for listening. George Rodriguez, El Conservador. Join us again next week, same time, same station, and a Merry Christmas to everyone.
The Federation for American Immigration Reform, known as FAIR, fights to restore common-sense border controls and immigration policies that work for America and its future. America's immigration system and border controls have been decimated by Washington politicians and special interests, undermining the interests and security of the American people. FAIR mobilizes grassroots activists to make sure the voices of the American people are heard in Washington. Find out more about FAIR and what we do by going to fairus.org.